In the intricate web of global trade, we are sometimes reminded that if we don't act in our own interest, others will. This is a poignant reflection that echoes in the current landscape of Brazilian agribusiness, especially as Europe positions itself as a guardian of timber legality and, by extension, of other products from our soil. The European barrier and Brazil's late awakening Brazil seems to have recently and belatedly woken up to the growing wall of Eurocentric demands rising against our agribusiness exports. To fully grasp this dynamic, we must revisit the history and evolution of the European Union's timber regulations, a path that serves as an essential guide for everyone in Brazil who lives and breathes agribusiness. The origin, the European Union Timber Regulation, EUTR. The journey began over a decade ago. On March 3, 2013, Regulation EU No. 9995/2010, known as the EUTR, European Union Timber Regulation, came into force. Approved by the European Parliament and Council in 2010, this legal framework was carefully planned with a predetermined start date to allow businesses and member states time to adapt. The EUTR's core purpose was clear: to combat illegal timber trade. To achieve this, it introduced three revolutionary instruments: prohibition of placing illegally harvested timber on the EU market, a direct barrier against products from illicit extraction, due diligence obligation. Operators placing timber and derived products on the EU market for the first time were required to conduct a rigorous risk analysis known as due diligence. Full traceability. Once on the European market, it was necessary to maintain updated records of suppliers and customers, ensuring the traceability of timber and its products all the way to the final consumer, even after processing and manufacturing. The regulation covered a wide range of timber products, from furniture and flooring to paper and pulp, using the European Union's customs code nomenclature. Initially, recycled and printed products were not included, but the possibility of amendment was always on the horizon. Importantly, the regulation applied to both imported and domestically produced timber in Europe. Due diligence, the heart of the conflict. The most contentious and complex point in the EUTR's implementation has always been due diligence. The regulation required operators to proactively manage risk to minimize any possibility of introducing illegally harvested timber or timber products containing illegally harvested timber onto the EU market. This diligence involved three essential pillars: information. The operator needed to have access to and present detailed information describing the timber and timber products, including country of origin, species, quantity, supplier details, and information on compliance with national legislation. Risk assessment. It was crucial to assess the risk of illegal timber occurring in the supply chain based on collected information and the criteria set out in the regulation. Risk mitigation. If the assessment indicated a risk of illegality, the operator had to seek additional information and conduct more stringent verification with the supplier to mitigate that risk. It's crucial to note that the EUTR considered timber and products with valid flagged EU Forest Law Enforcement, Governance and Trade, or CITES, Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora, licenses to be in compliance. The mention of these documents is not random. It underscores the decisive influence of NGOs established in supplier countries, which even act as monitoring organizations recognized by the European Commission, assisting operators with their due diligence systems. From the outset, geopolitics proved intrinsic to the regulation. The New Frontier European Regulation 2023/1115 EUDR. Since then, European timber legislation has evolved significantly. In 2021, a new proposal aimed to combat EU-driven forest degradation, repealing the EUTR and introducing even stricter measures for placing and exporting products associated with deforestation. In June 2022, the European Parliament approved the new resolution on illegal logging in the EU, emphasizing the need for continuous assessment and more effective actions. Thus, the European Regulation 2023/1115 EUDR was born. This new law against deforestation and forest degradation of the European Union deepens the previously established procedures, further impacting Brazilian agribusiness exports. The regulation now requires auditing throughout the supply chain for an even wider range of products, including coffee, cocoa, cattle, timber, palm oil, among others, imposing a rigorous adaptation process on Brazilian producers and exporters. The Eurocentrism is evident, including a process of dialogue and education for exporters regarding Brazil's own national legislation. The EUDR's objective is, undoubtedly, to eliminate deforestation and forest degradation in the supply chains of agricultural products imported by the European Union. For Brazil, a giant in soybean and beef exports, the implications are significant. The intention to control illegal deforestation in Brazil could paradoxically affect a large portion of Brazilian production that already complies with national environmental laws. Geopolitics in command and the reality of facts. The Brazilian government's apathy before, during, and after the entry into force of these regulations is, to say the least, regrettable. Unfortunately, the same indifference is seen in the timber production sector, systematically oppressed by environmentalist forces embedded in the bureaucracy and organized civil society in Brazil. National agribusiness knows that, one way or another, these measures directly affect Brazil's exports. The government's and the productive sector's notorious lack of commitment to finding an acceptable solution, one that would involve compliance with feasible legislation effectively in force in our territory, has historically hampered the sustainable management of our production. This is even more critical if we consider the principles of the 1992-2012 United Nations Declaration, which point to respecting proportionality in the application of norms based on the asymmetrical stage of technological and economic development of countries. International norms should not, in theory, create trade barriers between nations. The reality is stark. Only a portion of the timber extracted in Brazil is certified. Most of our production remains at the mercy of this non-tariff barrier erected by the European Union, which now extends to coffee, cocoa, cattle, and vegetable oil, while here official-sounding words are spoken to the wind. In Europe, public agents work tirelessly, supported by Brazil's competing producers and even private agents based here, who, ironically, seem intent on sabotaging our own sovereignty. Conclusion: for true sovereignty and sustainability, it is more urgent than ever to forge a new environmental geopolitics that ensures our sovereignty and provides real, effective, and feasible sustainability for our production. Furthermore, it is fundamental to re-educate and update agribusiness managers on the complexities and impacts of the European regulations in force. Brazilian inaction in the face of these regulations is not just a bureaucratic issue. It is a matter of sovereignty and our future. Brazil has the potential and the responsibility to lead, but to do so, it must act. Thank you for watching.